Warhammer, booze, a fly, bones, and this guy. Look at this beauty. I bought this not long after it was released, ages ago, back when the world was still very much black and white. At the time I gave these miniatures a prime, some even had a wash. I then put this all back in a box and then on the shelf, and it's sat there ever since. Don't do this. With the impending old world coming down the pipe, it's a good time to blow off the dust and give these miniatures a new lease of life. As my 7th ex-wife once said to me, bigger is certainly better. So with that still ringing in my ears, let's give this guy a bigger base. We'll get a bit of polyfiller down and push the original base in place, and then we can smooth everything in to create a seamless join, I hope. To tie the base in with the original miniature, we'll add some skulls. This skull box set from Games Workshop really is worth its weight in gold. I probably use these on every single build I do. Quick layer of PVA, and then off to the greenhouse. I do occasionally grow things in here, chilies in this case. And while they grow, I'll sift out some of this dirt and try and get it fine enough to replicate sand. Everything's had a black undercoat and a white zenithal prime. Once that's dry, we'll start with the bones. Using a skeleton horde contrast paint here, this works really well. And to be honest, does most of the heavy lifting for you. While that's drying, we'll start on the sand. We'll use a contrast yellow. We'll go over it with some washes and a bit of dry brushing. Using different yellows, and of course pale sand. Whilst all this was drying, I was visited by a fly. This is a bit of foreshadowing for what comes later. Once the sand is dry, we can work on the base of the altar. We'll give it a coat of grey, and then once that's dry, give everything a white dry brush, bones and stone. Using the fly as inspiration, we'll paint some of these scarabs. We'll give them a white undercoat and then a turquoise contrast paint over top. See, flies are not too bad. We can now start on the altar. We use the same grey as a base, block it all in, quite a lot of gold on this one, so we're blocking all the details. Using my maximum level of concentration whilst leaning my head against the light. We'll then use the turquoise we use on the beetles. We'll give it a wash of Reichland flesh shade. And then a white dry brush on the stone. For the skulls, we'll dab in some blood. It's dried blood, so it needs to be quite faded. And then for the top of the open skull, we'll use some brighter red. Look at this show off. A priest. We'll start with the big areas first. That'll be his coat. Maybe made of skin, not sure. But we'll get all the browns in. And then onto his tassels, maybe? We'll give him a dark purple undercoat. I'm sort of using the box art as an inspiration here. I'm not going to paint box art style, but it's a good base to work from. All the skin gets a reasonably dark green undercoat. tie in the metallics, we're going to use the same gold here as we used on the altar. And also the same turquoise contrast paint. We can start picking out the details of a lighter green on his six-pack. This guy clearly goes to the gym. Taking our time here, getting lighter each time with the greens. We'll do the same with the turquoise, using a lighter turquoise and pick out some of the edges. And give all the gold areas the same Reichland flesh shade that we used on the altar. Back to some finer details now. Final definitions on the muscle. Using some lighter purples, we'll pick out the edges of his tassels. And then the edge of a brush to pick out the edges of the tassels. So with the altar painted, the base painted, and the priest painted, there's only the mummies left to go. With drink in hand, we're on the home stretch. We start with the golds here, using the same we've used everywhere else just to tie it all in. And then back to the skeleton hall contrast paint on the bones. Our favourite turquoise contrast paint. Picking out his, I'm not sure what you call this, like a massive collar maybe? On the front of his skirt, I really need to learn my clothes terminology. Then his massive sword, I'm sure he's not compensating for anything. And fill in the rest of the details, his fabrics, using greys going into a light blue. And again we can use the edge of a brush to pick out the edges of the fabric. Pick out some of the details on the front of his skirt, and the same for his massive collar. We'll give the bones a gentle dry brush of white, and all the miniatures are done. You can now stick these together. With all the miniatures in place, all we've got to do now is take a look at the final reveal.